So BlizzCon Day 1 is over, at least the World of Warcraft news portion of it, so whether you attended and want to experience that again, whether you missed the sessions or didn't attend at all, or you're just curious, let's cover all of the World of Warcraft news that dropped today. We'll start off with the opening ceremony, then cover the Retail WoW What's Next session, and then end with the Classic WoW What's Next section. Hopefully I can make this a little more succinct than the 2.5 hours it took Blizzard to get through all of this information. So let's get rolling. During the opening ceremony, World of Warcraft is at the very end after we get through all the other Warcraft content like Hearthstone and Rumble. To get us started, a quick call out to Hardcore is made with a comment that seems to hint that maybe Hardcore is a mode that will be coming to more different versions of the game, like perhaps Retail WoW.
The team is planning to add a new way to play Hardcore early next year.
I would be excited for that personally. Hey there, Rotan here. I make to-the-point videos about World of Warcraft, helping people obtain collectibles, cosmetics, and mounts that they want easily and quickly. If that sounds like a fun time, subscribe. Then we get some classic news. They hint at what may be coming next, and they say they got a lot of community feedback.
We looked at your feedback to think about where are we going to go next.
Is it going to be Classic Cataclysm? Is it Classic Plus? Because I would really love Classic Plus, and it would be super awesome to see. And it's Cataclysm. Okay, well, I was disappointed when I first saw this because Cataclysm just feels like Retail WoW to me. I mean, there doesn't seem to be very much of a reason for me anymore to go back and play Classic if it's Cataclysm. However, right after this announcement was made alongside a pretty cool trailer, I'll give them that, they did mention some stuff about what could be called a version of Classic Plus. They call it the Season of Discovery. It's essentially just Classic reimagined. Endgame raids at level 25, new abilities and such, and then endgame content released every once in a while as they slowly raise the level cap. It sounds like an amazing idea, and it was everything I was originally hoping for in something like Classic Plus. I really hope stuff like this continues in the future. And the most exciting news of all from this, it's coming out at the end of this month, November 30th. So that was the classic news during the opener, and then they decided to touch on retail. They mentioned the new patch in the new season that's coming out in just a couple weeks, but they didn't stick on it too long before they brought out the big guns with Chris Metzen to talk about the future of World of Warcraft. And here is when things got exciting. First off, Metzen reveals that the dev cycles between the expansions will be sped up.
We are working on multiple ways to deliver this adventure to you a little faster than you're used to.
And that there's going to be a multi-expansion long storyline being revealed, which is known as the World Soul Saga. Pretty neat. And then the real news kicks in when Chris Metzen reveals the next 3 expansions that are coming out. Yeah, 3. He didn't just reveal the next 1. So we have The War Within, Midnight, and The Last Titan as the next 3 expansions. The War Within is up right away, and I'll be talking about that later on in the video, so I won't touch on it now. Afterwards is Midnight, which is Blood Elf themed, which is awesome. Quel'Thalas always deserved a better treatment than what it got. And The Last Titan is Return to Northrend, which is, always a fan favorite. The War Within then has a reveal cinematic, which is pretty sweet. I encourage you to watch it. And now let's go over all the new things we learned about the expansion from both this session as well as the next kind of what's next session that they showed and put on. It's basically all going to take place underground, lore-wise. We have 4 new zones, the Isle of Dorn, which is an above-ground starter zone, and the first one we encounter on the new continent, Khazalgar. The second zone is the Ringing Deeps, which is a subterranean zone where the newest race comes into play, which is the Earth. And by newest race, I mean they're going to be an allied race. I'll touch on that later. They have a whole culture that was explained in depth during the session. The third zone is Hollowfall, which is an open cavern where Arathi warriors are, which look awesome and have their own culture as well. I love their armor sets. And the fourth and final zone is like a Nerubian hive, which is known as azj-kahet, very Nerubian, which will house the first raid of the expansion. I wonder if the capital city or hub for players will be in this zone or one of the earlier ones. They also announced dynamic riding, which is essentially dragon riding, but on any flying mount really, which I'm really excited for. I'm sure there'll be some exceptions, as there always is, to which mounts this applies to, but overall I've been asking and hoping for this since the release of dragon riding a year ago. And yes, this type of riding can be done in the new zones, and there are no loading screens between these massive underground zones, so it feels very seamless. They talked about delves, which are a new feature announced as kind of this new scenario/dungeon type of world event on the overworld, which allows either solo players or up to a group of 5 to knock these things out for some quick rewards. Bran Bronzebeard is joining as the companion for the first season in these delves. There's apparently some mount rewards and cosmetics that will be available here as well. Otherwise, I just really wouldn't be very interested in this concept. War bands were another feature that they touched on, which is essentially just a fancy way for them to say most of your progress is account-wide now, including new reputations and new renowns for this expansion, and things like transmog appearances will be shared so you don't have to grind on each character individually. It's a good quality of life update. It's interesting they're giving it a whole feature section and not just saying it's an update. So I mentioned earlier there's a new allied race, the Earthen. I mean, there's not a ton more to say here. We don't know much, but they're another dwarf allied race similar to the Dark Iron. The one thing we do know is that they'll be able to actually be made for both factions, just like the Pandaren were. I do also have an inkling more allied races will be coming, like the Arathi or maybe the Nerubian will be added later, especially since they were given similar airtime and slides that covered them. 8 new dungeons are coming to the expansion, 2 in each zone, 1 during your leveling experience and 1 that's meant for max level, kind of the same thing they've been doing for the past couple of expansions. They mentioned 1 dungeon is all about the kobolds and their candles, and 1 is all dragon riding or dynamic riding focused as well, which is really exciting. I'm excited to try all of these out. They sound pretty awesome. The newest raid is Nerubar Palace and will be taking place in that final zone. It features 8 bosses, is Nerubian themed of course, and as a special treat they even showed us a rudimentary mock-up of the map and layout of the raid itself. Now, we don't know much beyond this, but it's exciting and I always enjoy a new raid. So just a couple more things to cover for retail WoW news. One, which they didn't express explicitly, but I'm going to throw in here and say it could be considered news, is that the kobolds have been updated. They have way better models and more variants to them. So yeah, that's that. And lastly, and probably my most favorite or close to it, are hero talents. So these are 3 new, basically what I'm going to call half specs that each class can spec into. They showed a nice little diagram image here to represent what this actually means, so I'll show it on screen. You can essentially choose between 2 of these hero talents depending on what spec you are. A few of them were revealed, such as Dark Rangers for Hunters, Farseers for Shaman, or the Warrior ones you see on screen. This does remind me of other MMOs where you got to further specialize multiple times as you leveled up instead of just speccing into 1 spec. So I'm really excited to see what this system will bring in the future. So that's retail WoW news in a nutshell, and by the way, it releases sometime in 2024, probably around November as usual. So let's move on to what's next for Classic WoW. The first segment was about Cataclysm, which I mean, there isn't a ton of new news to share here. They talked about all the things that are already known about Cataclysm because it's existed before, such as the raids, the zones, so on and so forth. They did eventually show a slide, though, explaining what all new was coming. Things like Heroic Plus is coming, some quality of life updates, such as account-wide transmog progress, which is just, I guess you could call that war bands, but for Classic, and faster leveling to 80. And they say and more, but that's about it for Cataclysm news at the moment. Now, next up was the hardcore section of this little whole session here, wherein they released the death totals by class. It's pretty funny to see these numbers, but as a data analyst for my day job, there's a whole lot missing from this chart to really paint a whole picture here. It's funny to show nonetheless. Also on hardcore news was something called Self-Found Mode, which is a new hardcore challenge mode where trading, the mailbox, and the auction house are disabled until you reach max level. Now, this is for the true hardcore fans out there that preferred the way that the add-on enforced it back when it was just a community thing and not an official game mode. So now let's talk about the Season of Discovery, which was my favorite part of this session and what they ultimately ended on. This is essentially Classic Plus. As I mentioned earlier, it's similar to what the community has been asking for a long time. There are class updates, new abilities in the form of something called runes, there are new secrets to discover, full redesigns of raids, a revival of unused and unfinished content all the way back from Vanilla WoW. Essentially, it's everything we've been wanting. We'll get new abilities via a new profession-esque ability known as rune engraving, and runes are found throughout the world by uncovering secrets, some more difficult than others. These abilities are either like from future expansions, or they're reworked abilities, or they're just completely new altogether. For example, warlocks, shamans, paladins, and rogue tanks are now viable, and mage healers are now a thing, which is pretty awesome. They really put an emphasis on the secret finding of these runes, though, so they want communities to be built around it. They want a lot of people involved, so there's probably some pretty cryptic runes and secrets to find out there. They are level banding everything to release content in waves, and each level band has a level cap, which has their own mini endgame. So the first level cap of Season of Discovery is 25, and the first endgame raid is a fully reworked Black Fathom Deeps. There's also zone-wide PvP in Ashenvale at level 25 that mimics Alterac Valley, but in the open world, and there's a level 25 mount in Classic that you can ride only while in that zone. Then they went over everything in a lot more detail, so if you want to know more about specific class abilities, specific raid bosses, or things like the raid lockout schedule, release cycle timing, go watch the full video. And once again, Season of Discovery comes out this month on November 30th, and I'm really hyped for this one. So that wraps up Day 1 World of Warcraft news from BlizzCon 2023. I'm trying to hit 5,000 subscribers, so your patronage in that regard is greatly appreciated. Tune in shortly for Day 2 World of Warcraft coverage after the deep dive session. Take care.